Hey, Greg, Start House. Today I'm going to show you guys how to kind of set up rear suspension air pressures with a shock pump, and kind of what happens to the shock pump in relationship to pressures when you connect to the shock. There's a couple tricks that you have to do to make sure all this ties the room together. So this particular bike, this Rebel Rascal, they want this bike to sag at about 30% of its travel in here with normal position seated body weight on the bike. So in order to check that, the body of this shock is 57 millimeters. 37% of that, or 30% of that is 17 millimeters of sag, and that would be sagged at 30%. So the thing I'm gonna do, before I even check air in this thing, I'm just gonna ballpark see where I am. I'm gonna slide the sag ring up against here. And for those of you guys that wanna check this on trail, I like to do this on really flat ground. And this is a great simulator for a rock, because there's all kinds of rocks on trails, right? So it's really easy to find a rock, and I kind of put the rock where the pedal would normally be. You don't really want to have your brakes on, maybe a little bit on the front just to hold the bike stationary, but no back brake. And I'm just going to sit normal riding position, try not to bounce, climb off the bike, and I'm going to see what I get for a measurement. And remember, I should be getting 17 millimeters. So for accuracy, we're going to hold the 10 up there, and I'm getting about 20 millimeters of sag on this bike. So that's a little too much. 17 is the number I'm going for, so it needs air, right? So I weigh about 140 pounds. If you've got nothing else but a pump and you just want to hit something with air, body weight is a great place to start with ballparking these things and getting you going. And we're going to find out how accurate that is for this particular bike. So we're going to do, this is kind of a two-parter. We're going to do A, how to set the sag, and then B, really important, is what happens to the pump when you connect it. When you connect the pump, this pump's gonna steal air from the shock to fill the hose and the pump body in here to give me a reading on my shock pump. So we're gonna use digital just to get some good accurate numbers with this thing. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna ballpark what I have in it. I'm not gonna ballpark, I'm gonna see what I have in it. So I've got 105, 106, somewhere between 105 and 106 PSI. We're gonna call it 106. Now, I wanna know what this shock pump steals from the shock when I connect it with air. So I'm gonna disconnect the pump, we're at 0, and I'm gonna connect the pump back on, and there's gonna be a number that's less than 106. 5 PSI is kind of the average of what pumps steal, and wouldn't you know it? So I'm at 102. So we're at 102. So we were at 106. So at this roundabout pressure, this pump steals 4 PSI at this pressure from the shock when I connect. So it's good to know for a little later down the road. So all I know is I need more air. I weigh 140, so I'm gonna put 140 in this thing and see how we do. Now, there's two parts to this. When you're making big changes like this in air pressure, if you look at this little divot in the air can right here, this is actually on the inside of the air can, that's actually a little notch that's cut into the can. And behind that notch is your negative air volume in the shock. And where I'm putting the air into, this is your positive air. And these things balance, these two chambers balance each other as the shock cycles. And we're probably gonna get a little different reading on here when I charge this up to 140. We're gonna see how much the negative kind of takes from that. All right, so let's try this. I'm at 142. I'm gonna cycle the shock a couple times, leaving this connected, and it's gonna steal some of this positive air and transfer it through this port back to the negative chamber when I cycle the shock. So let's see what happens here. So it only stole a PSI. Yeah, so not much, but it did balance stuff out. We only changed 30 PSI of air pressure in here. So I'm gonna let this down to 140, just so we're dealing with even numbers here. Okay, so I got 140 in my pump. I'm gonna check sag, and then we're gonna reconnect this pump and see what the air pressure loss is at 140, just so I know, so when I go testing this bike later today, I kind of know what I'm working with. So again, I'm gonna slide the sag ring up to the air can of the shock on the body. I'm gonna climb aboard, just gently resting body weight on the bike, just front brake, no rear. On my left foot, I've got barely any pressure on there, seated in a normal riding position, climbing off, and let's see what we get for sag. So I'm at about 12 to 13 millimeters of sag. I like to do this a couple times to see how things are. I usually do it 3 times just to get a good average. So I'm at 14 this time. So pretty close to the same. I'll do it one more time just to make sure. And I'm 15. So we're gonna call the 14, 15 somewhere kind of where this is. So there's a little too much air in here, so I need to let a little bit out to get my 17 millimeters of sag per manufacturer recommendation. So we had 140 in there. I want to take out about 5 PSI out of this shock to try my next setting. So when you're doing little changes like this, sometimes simply connecting the shock pump. So 135, 136, 135. So this pump's stealing at this pressure between 4 and 5 PSI of air when I connect. I'm gonna try to bump this down to 135. Okay, so 135. I'm gonna disconnect and see what I get for sag this time. So slide the ring up again, get tape measure, and I'm 15. Try one more time. And I'm 15, so I want to let another 5 out. And the beauty of knowing how my pump works is that I can just simply connect the pump. The pump's gonna steal 5 PSI from the air chamber here of the shock. And if history repeats itself, we should be getting 130, give or take. We got 130. Okay, so I'm gonna disconnect. And you'll hear when you take the pump off of the shock, you're gonna hear a little and everyone thinks that you're losing air out of the shock, but trust me, the air is coming out of this pump because this is an open-ended system and this system's closed. So everything you hear in air loss is just out of the pump. A lot of people think that a little bit bleeds out of here, and if it did, you'd never get a good setting. Everyone's shock would always be off because it would depend how fast you spun the shock pump off there and a bunch of other variables that would drive you crazy. So we'll slide this up again. Okay, so now I'm at 17 millimeters of sag. I'm gonna check it one more time. And I'm at 17 millimeters of sag. Okay, so now I know a few things. I know that my shock pump steals 5 PSI from the shock when I connect it. So later today, if I feel like it's riding a little mushy, I'm gonna stop, spin the pump on there. I'm gonna get 5 PSI less than I have, which would be 125. But if I want it to be more firm, I'm gonna bring that number up to 135 or maybe even up to 140. This sag is just a good general starting point for where your air pressure should be in the shock. And it's important to know what your pump does when you connect. Not all pumps are created equal. Some pumps you connect, you lose 10. It really depends on the length of this hose, and how much volume you have in this body and what happens to the air inside of here. And if you really geek out on this stuff, digital is the way to go. Dial gauges are great. There's probably no super accurate gauge in the world, so if your pump says 130, you just gotta trust that it's 130. Even if your buddy's pump says 150, it doesn't matter. As long as you're using the same pump for your testing, that's the important part. So again, general starting point here with air. I know how my pump works. I know that I got 130 of air in there. I'm gonna go ride later today, see how things do, and I'll adjust accordingly, but I got my baseline setting. Up to a point, if I take a little more air out or put a little more air in, meaning like 10 or 15 PSI one way or the other, that's gonna be okay. Even if you look at a manufacturer's recommended air chart, if you're a little outside of that scope, for your particular riding style and trail conditions, that could be fine. But again, good starting point and baseline setting is all you're trying to establish. There's a lot of crazy wormholes we can go with the volume reducers and progressive spring rates and stuff like that, and I'm sure you're gonna get a video on that down the line, so don't forget to like and subscribe for all that stuff. And we'll just keep building on this as you guys kind of keep logging in with more questions, and we'll provide more answers. Okay, have a killer day. See ya.